The final episode of Impeachment American Crime Stories here called The Wilderness, and I'll give you my thoughts and review on the season finale right after the jump. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. This season of American Crime Story has been fascinating. It's been entertaining. It's been heartbreaking. It is a show that I was of age to remember a great deal of what happened here, but not really. Also, at the age where I didn't care enough to kind of follow along and see all the minutia and all the details that were kind of happening, why it meant so much more than other than all I knew, all I cared about was, oh, the president got his dick sucked by a woman. Who gives a shit? You know, that was my thought process of it. And now to see that there's so much more and why we cared so much more about the perjury and all that and what it did to the women all are sort of surrounded around this entire thing has just been fascinating and heartbreaking to watch. And so this last episode is all about the Star report being released and the subsequent impeachment that follows. The top of this episode begins with Monica securing a book deal. And she wants to get a book deal so that she can get her word out, her likeness out, her actual voice out, so people can hear her as opposed to these things that they've heard from other people from secondhand sources. She wants to do that. She's been going around in different places. Some people she doesn't feel have been the best interest, her best interest at heart. Feel very tabloidish. But then there's one who she's like, well, this person did the Princess Diana book. They didn't say his name, but it's Andrew Morton who did the Diana book, and that's who she plans to go with. And her mom seems very reticent for her to do a book deal, but Monica's like, I gotta pay for these lawyers that I've had. Like, I've got nothing else. Like, with this, this has put us further and further behind in debt. And so we have to do something. And what we sort of see in this episode is there is a subsequent amount of money that is spent for all the people from whatever walks of life. Because Monica comes from a more affluent family, but she herself, they've just been spending money left to right. Paula Jones has to do things that are outside of her wheelhouse to sort of make ends meet, much and do so not to the something that is of her character. Linda also has like just the lawyers. Clinton doesn't have to pay for anything. It's sort of coming through and sort of being paid for by the the White House. They do, and it's a bit unfortunate. It's definitely David versus Goliath type of situation. But basically, this episode started triggers and goes off when the Star Report hits the Capitol. And so the way this all worked is just fascinating. I was curious to see this. The Star Report was not known to anyone that it was going to go out that day. Star Report was going straight to the Capitol, and then at the same time, subsequently, they were going to take the Star Report and upload it to the interwebs, the internet, and it was going to be available for anybody to read and to listen to there. Uh, Prior to them taking it, like right before that, um, the snowball starts rolling that, oh, this is about to happen. And so it gets out leaked that the Star Report is going to be issued today, and they're like, oh, that's today, and they thinking it's going to be later in the day. The president's like, is it coming to us? Like, no, it's going straight to the Capitol, and so they have no idea what's happening in it. They don't know how detailed it is. They have none of that information, nor does Monica know what's in it. So it sort of just becomes this free for all where everybody's like, I'm at the mercy of whatever Star has decided to put in this dossier. And so they get it there, and immediately Brokaw's on the news. Everyone is like ready and willing to just go into it, and it is a very personal report. I don't remember this at all. Every single detail that Monica laid out in those interviews with that woman in the last episode, with the woman female prosecutor, about the cigar uh, being used on her, every single encounter they had was all in there. Far more personal stuff than it is about the legality of what has been done wrong. Um, which is sort of why Star ends up in this, why this thing doesn't work out to what Star wants it to be, because it seems like he's more doing a personal attack than he is on proving that the president did legally anything wrong. Morally, he's a shit show. But it's heartbreaking to know and sit there while very explicit and uncomfortable details about the sex life and the sexual escapades you partook in with the married man are being shown and read to from everyone. You're sitting there with your mom, and this is being reported back to you in earshot of all the things that you did to her. It's being uploaded, and her dad is on the phone. She's like, "I'm trying to upload so I can read it. I'm still reading it." And she starts hearing what's in there, and she's like, "Dad, don't read that. You can't read that." And eventually, he does have a combo. It's like, it's still his little girl. He didn't read it. He's one of the few folks that did not read it, as did a close friend of Monica's. She says she also did not read it. But you're having this read in great graphic detail. Chelsea read it. She's at school and people are jeering and looking at her. This affected everyone that had anything to do with that. And Hillary goes on to say, when he's trying to get her attention, Hillary so-and-so would say that I didn't read it, I won't read it, but Chelsea did. And that's a conversation you're gonna have to have with her. She didn't say that, but she's like, that's the look she gives. That's the conversation you're gonna have with her. I'm not gonna read that. I already know that you've done some filthy shit, but there we go. It is interesting in this episode because the one thing that I think sort of gets lost in all of this is that all of this should have done most people in, and Ann Coulter played wonderfully by Colby Smulders. So much just says that, we got him. He's done. Like, he's going to have to resign. There's no way he can go from this. But what we see is, and she comes back later to say when she's in conversation with Matt Drudge, they're like Teflon. Somehow they became more popular outside of this. Hillary Clinton poll numbers jumped through the roof to the point where she was able to get a Senate seat. And yeah, sure, he had some stink on him, but he was still considered to be favorable when it was all said and over. And the villains are the people who put all of this stuff in light. Like Linda Tripp's the villain, Ann Coulter, Matt Drudge, Starr, they're all considered to be the villains of this story, whereas the Clintons kind of walk away scot-free, which is fascinating. They became more popular because of this and have subsequently gone on. Now, it looks like it may have backfired on the back end for Hillary now, but at that point in time, it seemed to be doing them wonders. Let's talk a little bit about the wheelhouse of women before we come into the back end, which the last act of this is just back to being Monica and Linda again. So I said in the last episode, I think Paula Jones was going to have much to do in this episode because basically her story is over. And to an extent, that is correct. She still doesn't have anything to do with the main thread of the story. But we do get to see the finale of that this took a toll on her financially. She didn't win the settlement, and she had to do things that were outside of her purview to make ends meet. She took a psychic hotline number. She became basically Dionne Warwick. She had to do a psychic hotline, and she had a commercial ad, and people would call her home number, and she had like a skit or a sheet that she had to read from. People were calling, but they weren't taking her seriously. They were still making fun of her, and they had to stay. The call that we get for this one, they had to stay in line for 5 minutes, but they timed it so that they know that they can get their joke in and laugh at her and move on. And she just wasn't making money. Steve's not around. Steve didn't get a job, so he's not sending any money back to take care of his family. She's just in it, just bleeding money. And we see a letter from Penthouse, which I mentioned in the last episode that I was aware that she had done Penthouse. And she takes him up on their offer. Susie gets wind of that, her old handler, and kind of calls her and just says, "Hey, how you doing? I'm in New York." Paula plays it off at first, like, "I'm going to be in New York too. I'll see you when I get there." And Susie's calling her specifically to tell her that she cannot do the Penthouse thing. "I'm having friends tell me what you're planning to do. The psychic thing was one thing. I can explain that away, but my religious friends don't get the penthouse thing, and you can't do that. There's no way you can come back from that. And Paul, look, I need the money. Like she's physically breaking down. Like I need the money. I cannot do this. Once this was all said and done, everybody went away. Steve's gone, you're gone. Everybody who was here is no longer here. The people who were just vulturing and taking money from me, they're gone, and I have nothing left. So this is what I have. I have to sell myself to get this done, which is unfortunate. I don't personally have a problem with nudity. If you want to get naked, I don't look at that as being a bad thing. However, if you're doing it not because you enjoy it or you're having fun or you're a free spirit or any of that, you're doing it because you need to make ends meet. That's when I feel dirty because I don't necessarily, and I don't know. Like this could be fictionalized. This Paula had nothing to do with this show, so I don't know if she did this for money or if she was doing this because she wanted to. They have made it dramatized that she looked like she was doing it for money, and because of that, it feels a little dirty. It sucks. And the whole shoot feels filthy and gross, and you feel grimy watching it. It's a naive woman who, yes, signed that to get the money and knew on paper, yes, like I gotta get naked, I gotta do this, but then when actually having to do it, it feels completely different. And it hurts, it's painful. It is shot parallel to a woman losing her power and then a woman gaining her power and ascending with Hillary shooting her Senate photos. It's a wild juxtaposition between the two women and how they were affected by this one man, but that is what we get there, and that sort of ends Paula. I will say one thing about the Paula thing that I didn't mention. When she's getting her hair styled, her stylist asked her if she did it. So even when all this is said and done, her husband doesn't believe her, no one believes her, and she still has this stigma out there that she is not to be believed. I don't think anyone ever honestly took her serious. It sucks because I don't know. I don't know, but I would lean to, based on all the other things that have come up surrounding him, I feel like she has more truth than not. The Clintons sort of are the middle ground. Once the middle of this episode, and this is a long episode, once the middle of this episode sort of wraps, they kind of go off into the sunset because this is more so about Monica and Linda than it is about them. But basically, Hillary gets a Senate seat. Clinton is found guilty on a couple of charges, but not enough to get removed from office. He's the stronger stuff. He still is allowed to stay in there. He does have to pay. And this is off of history, not necessarily shown on the show, but he does have to pay fines and this and that. But all in all, he gets to remain in office, and they continue to sort of ride off into the sunset. They do far more damage to everyone else than anything happens to them. They sort of become more than this. They do give, via their lawyers, Bill Clinton gives Monica a bit of an apology, but it feels empty. It feels useless, and that's all she really gets. Linda. Linda. I feel like I'm saying that little kid that used to, Linda, you're not listening, Linda. Linda Tripp. Linda is getting jeers and recognized wherever she goes. People are laughing behind her back consistently. They are, she's the butt of a joke. She's the villain. She is the villain in all of this. As much as people aren't mad at Clinton, or the Clintons, and they are poking fun at Monica and having fun at her expense, but they don't think she's the villain or the bad guy. And some people actually feel sorry for her. For Linda, unanimously, everyone hates. And that's a hard cross to bear, especially when you possibly could feel like what you've done is for naught, because while you thought you were doing the righteous thing, you can see that the writing's on the wall that everything's going to remain status quo when all this is said and done. So Linda has to go talk to her lawyers and try to get her job back. She's still petitioning to Ken, like, hey, give me my job back, And his lawyer's like, you have a problem. You may suffer some indictment charges. You may get called to testify and put on an indictment here in Maryland. And she's like, well, hold on, I have immunity. Like I shouldn't be that these tapes and whatnot can't be used against me. And he's like, well, you have federal immunity. Illegal taping of conversations can still be found to be tried here on the state level, and your immunity and federally doesn't cover that. And she kind of loses, like, wait, how the hell is that possible? And then it's in a D.C., it's in a Democratic state, so obviously. And then she finds out that Monica could testify. It's like, no, that cannot happen. We cannot have Monica testifying. Because she knows that's going to come make her look even worse as a person. She then goes to a book, I believe a book signing deal with Lucianne Goldberg, played by Margot Martindale. And people are giving her the stink eye there, but she and Margot have a conversation. People are giving her the stink eye, but she and Lucianne have a conversation, and Lucianne just tells her straight up, you're cold. You're not hot anymore. We can't do a book deal with you. And Linda kind of like, I wasn't doing this for a book deal, which is true, but also bull. I feel like she definitely wanted to get her name out there and have the say that Monica gets to say that she doesn't get to say. She hears that Monica has a book deal and it's getting signed off, and she's like, wait, Monica's getting a book deal from the person who did the Princess Diana book? Like, what? But Lucianne tells her, like, you're cold because everything that you would have said in your book is all out here in the open. These tapes are your book, and since they're out here, there's nothing new you can offer. The only person that's out of this situation that they want to hear from that they haven't is Monica, because she's the darling of this whole thing. She's the butt of the jokes, but she's also the one that has the most that can be said about the situation. So, sorry, this is kind of the end of the ship for you. And as she's leaving there, she has a conversation with some people that originally don't recognize her. And she's like, hey, and he's heading down the elevator. He's like, hey, is this a good restaurant here? And he's like, yes, it's really good. You should try the Cobb salad. He's like, all right, thank you. She turns around and he recognizes her. She's like, aren't you Linda Tripp? She's like, you did a hideous thing. And then the door is closed. That's rough. And she just keeps getting hit with that over and over and over again. Everybody's like, you are wrong. You did the wrong thing. You did bad thing. And she has a conversation with the daughter, and she's like, I would do this again. I did the righteous thing. My father was a liar, and I feel like I need to do something that was right. Her whole story ends in juxtaposition with Monica press tour, where Monica is just getting flashbulbs and just paparazzi and everything. It feels overwhelmed. And then we get Linda sort of at home doing these interviews. She just had plastic surgery. Plastic surgery, mind you, I believe, is just make herself just slightly more unrecognizable to the people that are around her. It just feels like she just is tired of always getting recognized and being seen. And so just a little slight thing of that will change that. But she's starting to do just these small interviews again, and she's asked, does she regret it? Still doesn't regret it. Never has. Even to her deathbed, which I know in present day, now that she's gone, she never regretted it. But all of that, the main thing is, like, is there anything that you want Monica to understand? And Linda says, I just want her to know that he caused all of this. She's the victim. He's responsible for all of this. And she, in a weird, twisted way, she says, I just wish that she could see that I saved her. Like, she still believes that she was the knight in shining armor that saved her friend. But she can't see that she caused so much trouble, so much damage for Monica. Because then we get in the juxtaposition, the other side of that, Monica's just getting flashbacks, flashbulbs. And we end the show with her saying, I'm okay. Which, in that moment, she is not. But we do know that this show decided, obviously, to not jump forward and tell us about whatever Linda Tripp did before she passed with the Christmas stores and all of that, which we know she was selling Christmas ornaments. She loved that stuff. And we see the sort of reinvention of Monica. We don't go into all of that. We still are sitting there, but we do know, because it ends on that, I am okay, holds a lot more weight, because we do know that in all of this, at the end of this, after many years of probably therapy and just kind of dealing with the muck of all this BS, she is now okay. And that is sort of the come to Jesus moment that this entire series sort of has by putting that poor girl through the rigmarole and everyone, the fallout of it all. People who got to kind of exist the easiest were the Clintons, and Monica got to wear the majority of the brunt of this. There's a wild scene halfway in there with Dr. Joyce Brothers. I think she just had a show or something, and they were talking, and they were basically saying, hey, it's going to be far easier for the Clintons to do something else than it would be for Hillary. I mean, it would be for Monica. And Dr. Joyce says, can you imagine being the son that brings Monica home saying that Monica's going to be your wife? All the stuff that was said in that very explicit, detailed Star report would be hard to overcome. And Monica's always said that. She had her friend comes to visit her to sort of give her that moment, that day away from hearing the tapes being read and played. And they have a back and forth, and it's good to see Monica actually laugh and kind of be herself again. It was the one person that kind of reverted her back to being when she was the truest version of herself she was. Um, she also didn't. That was the other friend that did not read all of that mess. But she goes on to tell her, like, who's going to want to be with me? Like, you're either going to want to be with me because you want to notch on your belt to say, hey, I was with the woman that was with the most powerful man in the world, or you're going to be here because to see if you can do some of the sexually explicit things that you heard that I did with this person. No matter what, it's going to be having to clear through the trash to kind of get to that one guy, and then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So it became hard for her, and she had the biggest brunt of all this to wear. So it is good to see now that she has come out on the end of this. I just wish it happened a lot sooner, and I wish that we lived in a world that was a lot more forgiving to this young lady earlier than what we got. But all in all, this is an amazing series. I actually might go back through this again just to rewatch it now that I have the entire thing, because some things I missed, some things that I didn't quite get, but just to kind of see the waves of the story and just to kind of feel that rush all over again. And I know there's going to be a lot of people who, this is only on FX, and they didn't have the FX to Netflix thing, so this is probably going to get a bump in about 10 to 12 months that'll sort of get revisited by a lot of people. It'll be curious to see a new wave of people who just didn't have access. But another solid American crime story series. Ryan Murphy does it again. I can't wait to see what he does next. I know there's an American sports story with Aaron Hernandez, which that should be fascinating too. But what did you guys think about this final episode, The Wilderness, from Impeachment, American Crime Story? Leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI, or you can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast by the same name that's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and here on YouTube. Like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.